Why are food prices still rising?
Have you been hungry?
I've been starving.
Simply because they've got nowhere to live.
They don't have any food in the house, they can't afford to buy any.
Kids are waiting for mental health support in this country.
If you get universal credit, turns out you're not entitled to any privacy.
In a shocking turn of events, the UK, once a global economic powerhouse, is now grappling with the harsh reality of poverty. Recent data reveals a troubling rise in unemployment rates.
There's so many of you that are probably in a really tough position, and it's penny to penny every month.
Inflation, although recently easing to 2.3%, continues to squeeze household budgets.
I used to be able to go and do a full week shop for a family of 4 in Aldi or Lidl's and fill up, the 2 big bag for life bags for around 50 quid. I've just been in Lidl's now and it was £92.
Post-Brexit trade disruptions have exacerbated the economic strain, contributing to a significant trade deficit. The cost of living crisis has made basic necessities increasingly unaffordable for many.
Have you been hungry?
I've been starving. I've been really hungry the last 3 days.
While the UK grapples with stagnation and fiscal challenges, nations like Rwanda and Senegal are capitalizing on growth opportunities, leveraging investments and improving living standards. But how did the UK arrive at this situation? The main reason is clear: 16 years of austerity.
Austerity.
Tory austerity.
Austerity. Austerity.
Austerity.
Introduced as the panacea for the financial ailments caused by the 2008 economic crisis, austerity measures were supposed to bring fiscal stability and economic health. Instead, they've left the UK feeling like it's been prescribed a daily dose of economic gruel. Austerity was launched with the noble intention of reducing the national deficit, a goal many agreed was necessary. But the medicine has proven to be as harsh as the disease. Let's start with the National Health Service, the crown jewel of British public services. The NHS has been subjected to relentless budget cuts, leading to what can only be described as a state of chronic malnutrition.
Victorian diseases are coming. Cases of scabies, rickets and scurvy are all on the rise in the UK, with hospital admissions for scurvy and rickets at 4 times the level of 12 years ago, according to the Royal College of General Practitioners.
Hospitals resemble overcrowded beehives with patients waiting hours, sometimes days, for treatment. Staff shortages mean that overworked nurses and doctors are stretched to their breaking points, often unable to provide the level of care they aspire to.
The UK was in 16th place for doctors per head of population.
The irony, of course, is that while the NHS is praised as a national treasure, it's being treated like an afterthought in budget allocations.
Here's why doctors are leaving the UK. This is America, where the salary goes from 243k to 576k average salary. And here's the UK, where the salary goes from 68k to 126k.
A nurse in the NHS often works 12-hour shifts due to a combination of staffing shortages, high patient demand, and the structure of healthcare delivery in the UK. The NHS has been grappling with significant staffing shortages for years. As of 2021, there were around 40,000 vacant nursing positions in the NHS. These shortages mean that the existing staff must work longer shifts to cover the gaps and ensure continuous patient care.
I've been a nurse for 25 years and approximately 2 years ago I left the NHS. Work almost 20 hours a week, some weeks as unpaid, and sadly when you're a nurse and working within the NHS it's kind of the unwritten rule, an expectation that you will work above and beyond your contracted hours for no extra pay.
By having nurses work 12-hour shifts, hospitals can reduce the number of shift changes, which can be both time-consuming and costly. This approach also means fewer handovers between staff, potentially reducing errors and improving continuity of care. Some nurses are probably happy to work 12-hour shifts, but for others, it can be problematic, especially when trying to balance personal life or childcare. While the NHS saves money through this 12-hour shift schedule, it damages work conditions for many paramedics. Personally, I think I would rather be treated by a paramedic who is happy to be at work than one who isn't. Mental health services have also faced severe cutbacks, just as the demand for them has surged.
Months ago, I saw articles out there saying that nearly 250,000 kids are waiting for mental health support in this country.
The stress and anxiety of financial uncertainty, compounded by reduced public services and job insecurity, have led to a rise in mental health issues. Education, another pillar of British society, has fared no better.
And several schools in England are on the verge of closing buildings as they fear an aerated concrete is prone to collapse.
It's outrageous that ministers have known for 5 years now that a school collapsed affected by this kind of crumbly concrete. I've been raising for months the need for action, and it's high time that ministers publish the full list of schools affected and came clean to parents.
Schools have been forced to tighten their belts to the point where they're cutting into the bone. Class sizes have swelled as budgets have shrunk, leaving teachers juggling more students with fewer resources.
79% of teachers in the last 1 or 2 years have had mental health issues due to stress because of their job.
Then there's social care, a sector that has seen its safety net transformed into more of a sieve. Funding cuts have left many elderly and vulnerable individuals without the support they desperately need. One poignant example is families who have to sell properties to afford the care of their elderly relatives.
Mum has dementia. In addition to residential care costs that we have to pay, we also have to pay the expense of one-to-one supervision to reduce her risk of falls. So that's over £9,000 a month that we're having to find, and we had to sell her house to be able to cover those costs.
Public sector workers, often lauded as the backbone of the nation, have borne the brunt of austerity's sharp edge. Pay freezes and job cuts have become the norm, eroding morale and financial stability.
500,000 on strike today is the biggest strike in Britain for a decade. And what it's really saying is whether you're a teacher, a train driver, a lecturer or a civil servant, you do not deserve to be poorer at the end of the year than you were at the start, even though you're working harder than ever before.
The public sector wage stagnation has contributed to broader economic woes, with consumer spending hampered by reduced household incomes.
The Resolution Foundation released an enormous report on the state of the UK economy, what might be done to sort it out. It's worth just having a look at some of the issues. This perhaps is the biggest one of all. This is showing you real earnings, so adjusted for inflation. Since 2000, they went up and up and up, and if they carried on in that vein, look, they might have gone up to there. Instead, look at what happened post-2008, something very different. That's basically the kind of flatlining, the stagnation they're talking about, to the extent that now there's this big gap, so we're all worse off to the tune of about £201.
Austerity has not just frozen wages, but also frozen the potential for economic growth. Communities have seen their social fabric fray under the weight of austerity. Public spaces like libraries, community centers, and youth clubs have closed or scaled back operations due to funding cuts. This loss has diminished social cohesion, leaving many communities without the vital spaces that foster interaction and support. The main justification for all these austerity measures was to eliminate the structural budget deficit and reduce national debt as a percentage of GDP. Osborne's June 2010 budget outlined these goals, promising that fiscal discipline would restore confidence in the UK's economic management, encourage business investment, and spur economic growth.
If we failed to tackle the deficit we inherited from the previous government, the consequences could be disastrous. If we don't get on top of our debt, every family in Britain will be poorer, and the dreams of millions of young people will be dashed.
The theory was that by demonstrating a commitment to fiscal responsibility, the government would assure investors and consumers alike that the UK was a safe bet. What was intended to be a strategy for economic health has instead led to widespread social and economic malaise. The evidence is clear. Austerity has hollowed out public services, strained the social fabric, and left many worse off than before. As the UK contemplates its future, it's crucial to remember that fiscal responsibility should not come at the expense of the nation's well-being. We can say that if austerity has been the illness, here we will expose the symptoms of the UK's downturn. From the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis emerged a new era for the UK's labour market, one marked by austerity, precarity, and a sense of enduring irony that would make even the most stoic Brit raise an eyebrow. A transformation of the labour market that left many workers feeling like they were starring in an economic farce. In the immediate aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, the UK labour market was hit with a double whammy: rising unemployment and stagnant wages.
I've applied for quite a few hospitality jobs. I haven't yet got any replies.
How's that been?
I'm getting used to it now. I've been getting quite a few rejections, so at first it was quite stressful, but I guess you just have to train yourself to see it as the norm.
The public sector, a significant employer, faced severe cutbacks as part of the government's austerity drive. Thousands of public sector jobs were axed, leaving a trail of redundancy notices and economic uncertainty in their wake. The irony here was palpable. While the private sector was reeling from the crisis, the public sector was being actively dismantled by policy. One of the most striking features of this period was the rise of zero-hour contracts. These contracts, which offered no guaranteed hours and no job security, became emblematic of the new labor market reality. For many workers, this meant a life of uncertainty, juggling multiple jobs without the stability needed to plan for the future.
A lot of the times I'll just eat the one meal a day that I get at work. Like, I know people that they'll work 7 shifts in a week because they don't have any food in the house, they can't afford to buy any. They get a free meal on their break, so they'll do extra shifts just so they can cover that.
It's as if the labor market had taken a cue from the theater of the absurd, offering employment that was both a job and not a job simultaneously.
More peace! When do we want? Fair contract! When do we want them?
It's sending a message to McDonald's. You are a global corporation. You have a duty to respect and honour those people that fill your bank balance.
In September 2017, the UK Office for National Statistics estimated that there were over 900,000 workers on zero-hours contracts, accounting for 2.9% of the employed workforce. As austerity policies deepened in the 2010s, the labor market underwent further changes. Public sector wages were frozen, leading to a decline in real wages when adjusted for inflation. This wage stagnation was a bitter pill for many workers who were already grappling with the high cost of living. The promise of economic recovery seemed a distant dream as disposable incomes shrank and household debt levels rose. Private sector workers fared little better. The gig economy blossomed during this period, driven by companies like Uber and Deliveroo.
But it sure is quiet today. I mean, I've only been online for 2 hours and I've made £18.33 in 2 hours. Isn't fantastic, but we continue.
While these platforms promised flexibility, they often delivered instability and exploitation. Workers in the gig economy found themselves without basic protections, like sick pay and holiday leave. The UK's labour market had become a patchwork of precarious jobs, where the line between self-employment and casual labour was blurred to the point of invisibility. Brexit added another layer of complexity to an already fragile labour market.
Let's take back control! Let's take back control!
The uncertainty surrounding the UK's departure from the EU led to a decline in business investment and a slowdown in hiring. Sectors that relied heavily on EU workers, such as agriculture, hospitality, and healthcare, faced acute labour shortages. This was particularly ironic given that one of the key arguments for Brexit was to regain control over immigration and job markets.
It's been an unmitigated disaster.
The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 brought unprecedented challenges. The government introduced furlough schemes to protect jobs, which provided a temporary reprieve.
I know the damage that this disruption is doing and will do to people's lives, to their businesses and to their jobs. And that's why we've produced a huge and unprecedented programme of support both for workers and for business.
However, the pandemic also highlighted the deep-seated inequalities in the labour market. Essential workers, many of whom were in low-paid, precarious jobs, bore the brunt of the health crisis while receiving little financial compensation for their risks. As the pandemic subsided, the labour market did not bounce back to its pre-crisis state. Instead, the long-term effects of austerity continued to cast a shadow, with youth unemployment rates significantly higher than the national average.
The latest unemployment rate for the whole country is 4.5%, but the Resolution Foundation calculates the rate for young people is a staggering 20%.
I could go and get a job at Tesco. I could go and get a job at Amazon. Do you know what the problem is? They won't even look at me.
The UK's labour market in 2024 remains a testament to the ironies of austerity. The country grapples with issues more commonly associated with developing nations: job insecurity, wage stagnation, and a fraying social safety net. The promise of a global Britain post-Brexit feels increasingly hollow as workers navigate a landscape of diminished opportunities and ongoing economic precariousness. In conclusion, the UK's journey from 2008 to 2024 is a masterclass in unintended consequences. Austerity, intended to foster fiscal responsibility, has instead eroded the labor market, leaving a legacy of insecurity and inequality. As we look to the future, it's clear that the lessons of the past must inform our approach to economic policy. Balancing the books should never come at the expense of the nation's workforce, and the story of the UK's labour market serves as a cautionary tale of what happens when austerity becomes the script for national policy. Another clear symptom of austerity is the broken British welfare system. In the post-2008 financial crisis landscape, the UK government embarked on a mission to overhaul the welfare system with the aim of reducing public spending and curbing the national deficit. This transformation, however, has been less about efficiency and more about pushing the vulnerable closer to the edge.
Most of the time when we hear that tune, it's when we're on hold. And we actually feel like the DWP and the system as it's set up right now is putting people's lives on hold.
Let's compare this with the more generous welfare systems of France and Spain, where the safety net is not just intact, but well padded. The UK's welfare reform, dominated by austerity measures, has turned what was once a reliable safety net into a precarious tightrope. Universal credit, introduced to simplify benefits by merging 6 into 1, has often felt more like navigating a bureaucratic maze, where delays and complications are common.
If you get universal credit, turns out you're not entitled to any privacy. In the autumn budget, in a few days' time, the government is set to announce new rules, which will mean that they have access to your bank account, your savings, what's going in and out, on a monthly basis. At the moment, they only do this on a case-by-case basis when they think that there is fraud happening, but now they will be accessing everybody's all the time. As someone who doesn't claim universal credit at the moment but has during this year, I find it really uncomfortable thinking that somebody would be snooping around in my bank accounts. To me, that's personal information. What do you think?
Luke. Yeah? Someone's asked, do savings affect your universal credit?
Yes, they do. And it's really important to understand the thresholds. So the first and more simple rule is if you have more than £16,000 worth of savings, you will not be eligible for universal credit. The second rule is anything over £6,000 is then counted as a monthly income.
Critics argue that this system has exacerbated poverty rather than alleviating it.
Terrible time. They done my review a year early with no reason, and they took me off everything.
With claimants often waiting weeks for their first payment.
It would help a lot of people with mental health if they could just survive with just a little bit more wealth.
Unemployment benefits in the UK are notably less generous than in many of its European counterparts. Job Seekers Allowance offers a flat rate of approximately £90 per week for those over 25. A sum that hardly covers basic living costs. Moreover, the UK's welfare system lacks earnings-related unemployment benefits, which means that unemployed individuals do not receive compensation proportional to their previous salaries. In stark contrast, France's welfare system is a model of generosity. Nearly a third of French GDP is spent on social services. Unemployed individuals in France can receive up to 57% to 75% of their previous salary, depending on their earnings and the duration of their contributions. Spain also provides a comprehensive welfare system, albeit in the context of high unemployment rates. Spanish unemployment benefits can amount to around 70% of the claimant's previous salary for the first 6 months, decreasing to 50% thereafter. This ensures that those who lose their jobs do not immediately plunge into poverty. Spain's welfare benefits extend to healthcare, family support, and housing subsidies, mirroring the extensive safety nets seen in France. Over the past 10 years, UK wages have experienced a troubling trend. They've barely budged. While the cost of living has marched relentlessly upwards, wages have remained stubbornly flat. This has created a situation where many Britons feel like they're running on a treadmill, expending a lot of effort, but not getting anywhere. One of the most pressing issues has been the stagnation of wages. Despite a nominal increase in pay over the years, when adjusted for inflation, real wages have seen minimal growth.
Minimum wage is £10.42. Average person works 38 hours a week. They're left with £1,500 a month. You've got rent, £650. Council tax, £115. Water, £40. Gas and electric, average single person, let's say £150. Then you've got a car. That's £200 a month on fuel alone, £60 on insurance. You've got your road tax at £10, TV licence, that's £13. Then, phone bill, £40 on average. You got your broadband, it's £20 a month, groceries. So let's say another £50 a week on groceries. That actually leaves minus £13. So that's before you've got Netflix or gone out or had any sort of social life. But putting that to one side, what about car repairs? What about when the fridge breaks down? People are left over with next to nothing. So this myth that debt only happens to lazy people is completely fabricated. Most of the people that we help are people that are working. If you are in a position where you start to struggle, or you've taken out credit, whether it's loans, credit cards, overdraft, or you've fallen behind with anything that I've mentioned there.
Public sector employees have been particularly hard hit. After the financial crisis, the UK government implemented a series of austerity measures, including a public sector pay freeze. Even when the freeze was lifted, pay increases were capped at 1% per year until 2017. These measures, combined with inflation, meant that public sector workers saw their real wages decline. For example, a nurse who earned £31,000 in 2010 would effectively be earning around £29,000 in 2020 in real terms, once inflation is taken into account. In the private sector, the situation hasn't been much better. The rise of the gig economy promised flexibility but often delivered instability. Companies like Uber and Deliveroo, while offering new kinds of employment, have contributed to the proliferation of low-paid, insecure jobs. Many gig workers lack basic employment protections, such as sick pay and holiday leave, making it difficult to achieve financial stability. A 2019 report from the Resolution Foundation highlighted that 22% of workers in the gig economy earn less than the national living wage. While wages have stagnated, the cost of living has continued to rise. Housing costs, in particular, have skyrocketed. According to the ONS, the average house price in the UK increased by 30% between 2010 and 2020, creating a significant financial burden for many individuals and families. This trend has made it increasingly difficult for people to afford adequate housing.
The thing that concerns me at the moment is we've got 3 young adults in our family, and all of them say to me that they feel hopeless, they won't be able to settle down, have children, move on with their lives, simply because they've got nowhere to live. They have tried to rent and they've had to move out because it's just got too expensive here in Trafford. The average rent round here is about £1,100. It went up 7% just last year alone.
One of the main drivers behind the soaring rental prices is the imbalance between supply and demand. There simply aren't enough affordable homes to meet the needs of the population. The National Housing Federation in Crisis estimate that England needs to build around 340,000 new homes annually, with 145,000 of these being affordable, to address the housing shortage effectively. However, current construction rates fall significantly short of these targets.
My own family once lived in one of the council flats behind me. It was the 1950s and my nan had just given birth to her first child, my uncle. When she was in hospital after giving birth, the council came and gave her the keys to a brand new maisonette right here. So why am I telling you this story? Today we have a chronic social housing shortage, but it wasn't always like this. During the 20th century, there was a huge social house building drive. That's because the majority of people were living in poor quality slum-like conditions in privately rented homes.
The impact of rising rents is felt acutely by households across the UK. The English Housing Survey found that private renters spend around a third of their household income on rent, with this figure rising to 41% in London.
You've said the gap between the problem and the solution is big. Both parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, say housing is a priority. I see little evidence that is the case. Rishi Sunak has his 5 pledges, not one of them is on housing. Keir Starmer has his 5 pledges, none of them are on housing. There's little detail in Labour's plan. Many people say what is needed here is a kind of 1950s style response, a mass house building across the country.
While the crisis is most pronounced in London, other regions are also experiencing notable, significant rent hikes. Average rents in England rose by 8.6% to £1,310 in June 2024. In Wales, the average rent increased to £743, and in Scotland, it rose to £959. These increases reflect the widespread nature of the rental crisis across the UK.
So we've just had our first people come round to view our flat. We currently pay £935 a month for our one bed flat. And the estate agent has just come in and they're putting it up to £1,200.
So for average, what would you say? A room and a house share average in London now, 1,000 to 1,200?
In a room share, even with strangers you don't know.
Yeah, with strangers. And not a great...
No ensuite.
Often definitely no ensuite.
No.
Shared bathroom.
Yeah.
And invariably no outdoor space.
Yeah, exactly.
For a very basic one bed, we're talking 2,100 plus.
Yeah.
That sounds about right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One thing is undeniably clear. The UK is in pieces. Years of austerity, stagnating wages, a strained public sector, and a crisis in the cost of living have left the country grappling with deep social and economic fractures. If you want to stay informed on the ongoing challenges and key issues shaping the UK's future, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insightful videos. Thank you, and see you soon.
If you are the average British person and you choose to stay in this country for the next 2 years, here's what's most likely going to happen. Your standard of living is not going to improve, your taxes may well go up, and you will continue to feel a squeeze to your finances.